I tried to film this video without the fan on, but the silence is truly deafening, and I physically cannot. I cannot sit here in silence. I am so sorry. Welcome back to my channel, guys. Those of you who are returning subscribers or returning viewers probably know by now that I was born and raised in Scientology. My content is not just Scientology content. That is not at all what I want my channel to be. However, it makes me feel better to be able to explain to people exactly what Scientology is, who David Miscavige is, who Ron Hubbard is. So when I left Scientology in 2019, I was on a mission to find the truth about Scientology and find the truth about our founder, Ron Hubbard. Something I ran into a lot during my search for the truth was how confusing it all was, right? I do a lot better with hearing things. I obtain information better whenever I am listening to a podcast or listening to an audiobook or listening to a YouTube video. A lot of my research is in the form of audio because I just retain the information a lot better. I, as someone who was looking into it truly for the first time, found it very confusing, and I found it very hard because almost all of the videos and podcasts I found were not just focused on one thing. There was never really anything that was just focused on Ron Hubbard and who he is and the lies he told. There was never anything just focused on David Miscavige or just Scientology or just Dianetics. There's just so much that goes into Scientology, and it was so hard for me to navigate through the internet and find exactly what I was looking for. I thought it would be a good idea if every so often I make a video about Scientology, but just focusing on one subject, if that makes sense. So today I'm going to be talking about Ron Hubbard. I'm going to be talking about his early life and his time in the Navy, and I'm going to be breaking down a lot of the lies that he told. So with all of that being said, today I'm going to talk about the life and many lies of Ron Hubbard. It was really hard researching it, and the reason why it was hard researching it is because it just I just couldn't believe that myself and my entire family had been fooled for so long by such a stupid individual. So quickly, I'm going to brief you all on who Ron Hubbard is per Scientology resources. Lafayette Ronald Hubbard was born in Tilden, Nebraska on March 13th, 1911. He spent his formative years in Helena, Montana, riding barely broken range broncs at 3.5 years old on his grandfather's gigantic ranch. Ron was reading science and philosophy well before his time at 3 years old, having came from a highly educated background, and he even became a blood brother to a Blackfoot medicine man at the age of 4. His father was a United States naval officer, which gave Ron the luxury to travel and see the country. At 12 years old, Ron joined Boy Scouts, and he was able to represent scouting to the President of the United States, Calvin Coolidge. And just days after his 13th birthday, he became the youngest Eagle Scout in U.S. history. At 16, his father's naval career landed him in Asia, where Ron was able to travel the lands. By 19, he had traveled, quote, more than 250,000 miles and traversed much of China and India, unquote, and even gained access to forbidden Tibetan lamaseries in the western hills of China, and, quote, witnessed wonders beyond any known scientific explanation, unquote. Ron returned to the U.S. in 1929, and he enrolled in George Washington University the following year as an engineering student, gaining a PhD, and attended the first American class on atomic and molecular phenomenon. He then became an author and wrote more than 300 novels and novelettes, and eventually wrote under 15 pen names and wrote scripted matinees for Hollywood. Because Ron had earned a rare master's mariner's license to captain any vessel in any ocean, he began receiving recommendations to commission as a naval officer during World War II. Discreet, loyal, honest, and without peer in the art of getting things done is how Ron was described in these recommendation letters. He captained warships in the Atlantic and Pacific and was highly decorated for his service, and eventually ended his service in the hospital where he was treated for wounds sustained during combat. He was left partially blind and was declared permanently disabled by 1945. He has been awarded 21 combat medals as a Navy lieutenant and even a Purple Heart. After leaving the Navy, he began working with injured servicemen who were not healing from traditional medicine, and he began using all that he had learned throughout the decades, using spiritual principles he learned in his travels through Asia, and using scientific methods from the Western world. He discovered that mental blocks were stopping medicine and traditional treatment from working. He realized that when the mental blocks were addressed, then traditional medicine became successful. From his findings, he released his book, Dianetics, The Modern Science of Mental Health, on May 9, 1950. The book hit the New York Times bestseller list for 26 consecutive weeks, and in December 1953, he founded the Church of Scientology, the fastest growing modern religion in history. So what I've just told you seems extremely remarkable and extremely unbelievable. If you're leaning more towards unbelievable, that is because 90% of what I just said were lies. Scientology website omits any information regarding Ron's wives, regarding his children, and regarding any actual hardships that Ron had gone through throughout his life. So the truth about L. Ron Hubbard was that he was a struggling author. He was not a war hero. He was quoted as saying, "You don't get rich by writing science fiction, you get rich by starting a religion." Ron was described to be a pathological liar. Ron was described to be very full of himself, very egotistic. He was a criminal. He evaded taxes for years till the end of his life. And it's just all of these negative things about him that the church coincidentally doesn't talk about. I went on the official Scientology website when I was researching for this video so I can get direct quotes from Scientology on who Ron was. And it was so hard to sit there and read these things because now that I'm out of the church, I am able to recognize brainwashing language. I'm able to recognize how they groom new members. So let's get started on the true story of L. Ron Hubbard. Ron was born in Tilden, Nebraska on March 13th, 1911. He was an only child to a teacher named Ladora May and to a naval officer named Harry Ross Hubbard. His dad was in the Navy, but he eventually got out. For much of Ron's childhood, he did live in Helena, Montana. His grandparents eventually settled in Helena as well, but his grandfather did not own a huge ranch. His grandfather was a small town veterinarian, and at the time his father managed a local theater. So the claims that Ron was riding barely broken range broncs was entirely false. The claim that he became a blood brother to a Blackfoot medicine man was entirely false. The Blackfeet Native American tribe don't even have a blood brother ritual. That is a completely made up Hollywood idea. So in 1917, Ron's father did rejoin the Navy to assist in World War I. Ron and his mother did travel the U.S. a lot, but they were traveling to ports where Ron's dad was. Ron did actually join Boy Scouts. He did earn the rank of an Eagle Scout right after his 13th birthday. However, the claim that he was the youngest in America could never be verified. They didn't keep up with age. And the claim that he was able to represent scouting to Calvin Coolidge was also never verified. In 1925, Ron enrolled as a freshman in Union High School in Bremerton, Washington. I'm so sorry if I mispronounce any of these words. And in 1926, he studied at Queen Anne High School in Seattle. But in 1927, Ron's dad was sent to Guam. And that summer, Ron and his mother followed. Ron's claimed that he traveled all over Asia and saw all of these forbidden wonders was a lie. He never even traveled to India. He never even traveled to Tibet. He did return to the U.S. in 1929, and he did enroll into George Washington University the next year. However, he never gained a PhD. Ron quit claiming that he had earned a PhD when it was found out that he had actually purchased the PhD from a company that sells degrees. And he was kicked out of the atomic and molecular phenomenon class for less than satisfactory grades. Ron married his first wife, Margaret Polly Grubbs, on April 13th, 1933. The following year, Polly gave birth to their son, Lafayette Ronald Hubbard Jr. They nicknamed him Nibs.
99% of what my father wrote and said about himself is totally untrue.
And in 1936, they gave birth to a daughter named Catherine May. Editing Trinity, hello. I forgot to mention this when I was filming it, but in total, Ron had 3 wives. His first wife was Margaret Polly Grubbs. With her, like I said, she had Lafayette Ronald Jr., and then she had Catherine May. His second wife was Sarah, what's her name? Sarah Northrop Hollister. And then his third wife was Mary Sue Whip. With Sarah, he only had 1 child, and her name is Alexis Hubbard. With Mary Sue, they had Quentin Hubbard, Diana Hubbard, Suzette Hubbard, and Arthur Hubbard. Arthur is estranged from the family. There is a lot of speculation on the death of Quentin Hubbard. When I was in Scientology, it was a well-known thing that Quentin had been taken out to the desert and was basically murdered by the U.S. government because as a way to get back at Ron for daring to challenge psychiatry. In reality, Quentin did commit suicide. I don't know how or why I forgot to include that, but I just thought it was important to mention. Sorry. At the time they lived in Maryland, Ron was a struggling writer. He had a very hard time providing for his family. He became known for writing a lot of pulp fiction. He wrote a lot of science fiction. He wrote a lot of fantasy, as well as he dabbled in romance and mystery. He spent a lot of his time writing out of a hotel room in New York City. His wife, Polly, her name was Margaret, but she went by Polly, but Polly suspected that he was having affairs. Okay, so I just want to start by saying there are so many layers to this. There are so many false claims that Ron had made about himself. There's so much information and lies that it's like almost mind-numbing. I had such a hard time researching this because it was like everything he said, you went to find the truth, and it was just lie after lie after lie and proof after proof, and there's so much information. I got a lot of my information from the underground bunker that's ran by Tony Ortega. If you don't know who Tony Ortega is, he is a journalist who since the 90s has been specifically writing about Scientology and giving updates about Scientology, and he has been contributing to the Aftermath Foundation. He has done podcast interviews. He has done so much to spread the word of Scientology and has helped so many people get out, and he has prevented so many people from joining. I'm going to link the specific blog post in the description that goes over Ron's time in the Navy and goes over a lot of the lies that he told and then the truths right after it, just because there's so much that I would be sitting here for like an hour and a half just trying to go through it all, and I don't think I would be able to go through it all. So right now I'm just going to tell you the information that I feel is important to understanding who Ron was. Feel free to take advantage of the links I'm going to be putting in the description to learn more yourself. So just about everything Ron wrote about his time in the Navy was a lie. He wanted so badly to be this war hero. He wanted so badly to be this captain that everybody respected and listened to, and because he never obtained that during his time in the Navy is why I feel like he runs the Church of Scientology, or ran. I should say ran, like he's dead. The reason why he ran Scientology, much like the Navy, is because he was never in control like he wanted to be while he was in the Navy. My laptop died, and I kicked my drink over. It's okay. I got everything under control now, I think. Whew. So, per the Scientology website, Ron was written many recommendation letters for the Navy. He was quoted as being discreet, loyal, and without peer in the art of getting things done. So, Ron actually wrote these letters about himself. He had a friend named Robert McDonald Ford. He was a state representative for Washington, and he claimed that Ron had written the letters himself. He claimed that he never understood why Ron wrote the letters. He basically just gave Ron this letterhead and said, "You're a writer, dude. Go for it. Write what you want." So Ron was posted in New York for training as an intelligence officer. He was in Melbourne waiting to be transported to Manila, and he was sent back to the U.S. There was a report written, and the report said, quote, "This officer is not satisfactory for independent duty assignment. He is garrulous and tries to give impressions of his importance. He also seems to think he has an unusual ability in most lines. These characteristics indicate that he will require close supervision for satisfactory performance of any intelligence duty." In 1943, Ron was sent for submarine chaser training. Later that year, while on a cruise bound for San Diego, Ron thought he had detected an enemy submarine. Ron ended up engaging in combat for almost 68 hours before he was ordered to return. Admiral Frank Jack Fletcher concluded in a report, quote, "An analysis of all reports convinces me that there was no submarine in the area." So basically, Ron was combating nothing. He was combating water. A month after the 68-hour combat with nothing, my man sailed a submarine into Mexican territory. He conducted a gunnery practice in waters that he believed were owned by the U.S., but they were actually owned by Mexico. The Mexican government complained about this, and Ron was relieved of his command. There was a report written on this, and in the report it states that he was unsuitable for independent duties, quote, "lacking in the essential qualities of judgment, leadership, and cooperation." It was recommended that he be assigned to a large vessel where he could be closely supervised. So after he was relieved of his command, he began claiming that he was sick and he had all these illnesses and ailments, and he was admitted to the San Diego Naval Hospital for 3 months. He continued being sent to several different posts. They couldn't trust him for nothing. It was like everywhere they put him, he messed something up so severely. Reported that Ron had found a homemade Coke bomb that was filled up with gas, and it's highly speculated that Ron had made this bomb himself and Ron had placed this bomb himself. After that, he just continued to complain about all these illnesses that he didn't have. Like, they could not find anything wrong with him. He was being admitted to these hospitals and they're literally like, "You're good, what are you doing?" It's found that he was entirely in good health. So the claims that this man was left partially blind and severely injured from combat were all lies. This man never saw combat. The only medals that he received for his time in the Navy were medals for, like, basically general participation medals that everybody in the military or everybody in the Navy receives. He never received a Purple Heart. He was never injured. After he left the Navy, he claimed that he was abandoned by his family because of being partially blind and because of his injuries. Basically, that his wife Polly had abandoned him because he was a cripple. In truth, according to his daughter Catherine, Ron went to California, and her mother, Polly, did not feel like uprooting her and her children's lives and everything they had going on in Washington to move to California. So Ron, instead of going back home with his family, stayed his ass in California, and he began experimenting with the occult. Ron met up with Jack Parsons, who was an avid occultist. Jack Parsons also followed magician Aleister Crowley, who was also an occultist. Very confusing. So Jack Parsons and Aleister Crowley basically were part of the occult. They did sex rituals and they did black magic and they were magicians, and it was just like a bunch of crazy shit. Ron partook in these sex rituals, and he also partook in black magic. So Ron is having all this freaky deaky sex and living it up in California, while Margaret Polly is struggle busting it back in Washington, raising their 2 children alone. Ron married his second wife, Sarah, in 1946 while he was still married to Polly. So eventually Margaret found out about all the affairs, found out about all the creepy, freaky deaky shit that Ron was doing, and she convinced Ron to agree to a divorce, and she convinced Ron to give her full custody of the kids, and they went on their merry way. After the divorce, Ron didn't have to worry about his kids. He didn't have to worry about Polly. All he had to worry about was his new wife, Sarah, and he got to just basically start over. He was a free man, and he got to start a brand new life. So good for you, Ron. So Ron continued his career as an author. He wrote a lot about his experiences in the occult and things that he learned while he was in the occult. He started writing a lot of affirmations, and it's believed that these affirmations were some sort of guide to self-hypnosis. These affirmations, like, I read them, and from what I gathered in these affirmations, it was basically he was calling himself out for faking illnesses in the Navy to get out of doing naval work. But he was, like, in these affirmations, setting himself free. I'm going to read you a quote to one of the affirmations. Your eyes are getting progressively better. They became bad when you use them as an excuse to escape the Naval Academy. You have no reason to keep them bad. So basically, he's calling himself out for lying, and he's like, you don't have to keep faking like your eyes are bad, like you're good, you're out of the Navy. So there's one that I'm going to read to you guys, and I'll tell you why this makes me really mad, okay? Quote, masturbation does not injure or make insane. Your parents were in error. Everyone masturbates, unquote. That made me mad because during my time at the church, when I was on staff at the Church of Scientology in Tampa, masturbation and anything outside of vanilla missionary sex with your partner was seen as very aberrated and out ethics. Aberrated meaning evil, and sinful was you basically being out 2D. 2D is your second dynamic. Which is basically anything you're being unfaithful to your partner. You were sinning by masturbating. There was this young teenage boy my brothers were friends with at the time, and it came out. I don't know how it came out. Maybe it came up during one of his ethics handlings or one of his sessions, but it came out that this young teenage boy had been masturbating, and he got put in lower conditions. In Scientology, the ethic conditions are conditions that one can be in based on how their life is going, and he got put in lower conditions, and he had to do this whole ethics handling to handle him masturbating. So the fact that Ron is sitting here and these affirmations telling himself that it's completely normal and healthy to masturbate, but somewhere in his writings for Scientology, he said fuck that and was pretty much like, no, you guys can't masturbate. So he ended up getting a lot of people in trouble. So he was still an author, but he was still a struggling author. He was only getting paid 1 penny per word, and he was begging the VA to increase his pension. By this time, he had written to several psychiatric facilities, begging them for help because he could feel his mental health deteriorating. From what I understand, he never really got treated for any of it. As a result of this, he began trying to treat himself, which eventually led to him writing the book Dianetics, The Modern Science of Mental Health, which was a new science on how to heal the body and heal the mind. And then in 1953, he founded the Church of Scientology. The remainder of his life, he was in hiding because even though the Church of Scientology was not recognized as a tax-exempt religion, he felt like it should be tax-exempt. So man just didn't pay his taxes. The Sea Org was actually created because he took to the seas to avoid paying his taxes, and he wanted a crew or people he could run on the boat with him, and he called it the Sea Org, and he said it was so he could do all this research to further Scientology, but really it was just a way for him to get out of paying his taxes. The last 2 years of his life, he lived on his ranch Whispering Winds. This ranch was located in Creston, California. On January 17th, 1986, he had a stroke, and then a week later, he passed away on January 24th, 1986. So, as somebody who grew up in Scientology and as somebody who worked at the church, Ron's death was made out to be intentional. It is not widely known in the church, if at all, because I had no idea. My mom, who was a Scientologist since she was a kid, we had no idea that Ron had died from a stroke. Even in the meeting where David Miscavige is standing up talking about Ron's passing, it is very much pushed onto members of Scientology that he intentionally dropped the body.
The body he had used to facilitate his existence in this messed universe had ceased to be useful and in fact had become an impediment to the work he now must do outside of
is constricting him from furthering his research, that him passing away was intentional. I know I didn't touch a lot on Scientology and Dianetics in this video, and the reason why I didn't do that is because I wanted to focus more on Ron Hubbard himself. The next video I make, I'm going to be talking about Scientology and what Scientology is. I'm going to be talking about Dianetics and what Dianetics is. Like I said, I just wanted to make a series of videos where I'm just focusing on like one subject, because I know, especially for people who don't know a thing about Scientology, or for people who are leaving Scientology and trying to look for the truth like I did, it can be very confusing to listen to these podcasts, watch these videos, or even read some of these articles and blogs, because there's just so much information, and it can't, like, it really, like, personally, it confused me. Again, I don't want my channel to be only Scientology content. Obviously, I have a bunch of other interests, and I like to make videos on a bunch of other things. Research in general for me is very fun. I do this as a hobby. I enjoy it very much so. I don't know when my video on what is Scientology will be out, but it will be out probably, if I had to guess, within the next month or so. But don't at me if it doesn't come. I am a busy person. So I want to conclude this video by saying, if you are somebody who was curious and interested in joining Scientology, I hope that this video prevents you from doing so. I know in my last video, a lot of people were telling me that watching my video prevented them from taking an introductory course in Scientology, and I was really happy to hear that. If you are somebody who is leaving Scientology and you need resources and you need help, I'm going to link the Aftermath Foundation in the description. Hopefully that can give you some help. I want everyone to know that the overwhelming support that I got on my Scientology video, it blew my mind. And then just in general, all of the support that I'm getting from most of my family and all of my friends, it like almost brings tears to my eyes. Everybody who messages me with their feedback and with their criticism and what they look for as a viewer of my videos, I listen to what you're saying, and I try really hard to make adjustments as needed per what my viewers are requesting. I hope that this video was very easy for you guys to navigate. If you have any questions, I'm going to actually link my Twitter. I'm either going to put it in the description or in a pinned comment. Feel free to DM me and I will get back to you as soon as I can. But with all that being said, thank you for watching my video, guys. I appreciate all of you, and I will see you next week. Bye!